Do you want to lead a prayer, Bishop? Hello.
We could start. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Our Father, who art in heaven,
Heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come,
thy will
thy
be
will
done.
be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses,
As
as
we
we forgive those who trespass against us, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from
Evil. Amen.
Father,
Amen.
Son.
Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, the bishop got me into a really an interesting topic, one that I had not really anticipated. As I researched it and I did more study about it, I found that it's really very important, at least in my estimation, to spiritual growth and spiritual and personal transformation. And that is that it talks about us as human beings that have not only intelligence but also emotions. One of the things about that is a relatively new concept. When you stop and think, in 1904, is Alfred Binet and Theodore Simon had invented what they call the intelligent quotients test. You could find a quotient about what a person's intelligence is. But it wasn't until 1990 that someone, and it was a junior professor at Yale, who even thought about, with his graduate students, thought about, maybe we can measure in some ways and look at the quotient for emotions, because they're an integral part of all human beings. There was a man that came along then, Daniel Goleman, who was a New York Times reporter, who popularized the idea. So it's a relatively new idea, considering, and it really, when you look at the history, because Peter Salovey, who was a professor at Yale, looked at one thing which was so important. That was Aristotle's challenge. Now, Aristotle, as you know, lived in 384 to 322 before the Common Era, namely before Jesus Christ. And Aristotle proposed this. He said, anyone can become angry. That's easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, that is not easy. And so, hello. So anyway, so what I'm going to try to do is giving you just an overview of emotional intelligence, because it's a very complicated and involved subject. But I would encourage you, and I'll give you some references as we go on, but encourage you to really explore it further, because I think it can really contribute to our effectiveness in ministry. I think to know ourselves and to know our emotions and how they impact us, I think can be very fruitful. So that's what I'm going to try to do. It's just kind of basic overview of emotional intelligence. Now, I think in order to do that, we've got to first decide, what are emotions? What do people say emotions are? Emotions are this. They're instinctive, natural states of mind that are derived from one's circumstances and relationships with other people. Also, emotions are intuitive feelings, and we have to distinguish them from reasoning and knowledge. There's psychological states which are brought on by neurophysiological changes and variously are associated with thoughts, feelings, behavioral responses, and a degree of pleasure or displeasure. And we're going to look at some of those and just explore that a little further. Now, so what then is emotional intelligence? Or as we say, if you measure in emotional intelligence, it's the emotional quotient. Here's a working definition that the professor from Yale came up with, and that is, well, that just did something. Oh, the pictures got in the way here. Can you still see the slide, or are the pictures in the way?
The slide with the working definition is visible.
Okay. A set of skills, that's what emotional intelligence is. A set of skills that can contribute to the accurate appraisal and expression of emotion, not only in yourself, but in others. And it helps you to effectively regulate the emotion in yourself and others. And then to use the feelings to motivate, plan, and achieve one's life goals. And I think in a very special way is to help advance the life of the parish. I think that's a very important thing, is that we can use these skills to bring this about. Now, there are many misconceptions about emotional intelligence. One is because it's a relatively new concept. Everybody's got their own ideas about it. It doesn't necessarily matter more than regular intelligence, but it can be more important than regular intelligence when it comes to health and relationships. And as you know, parishes are all about relationships. And it doesn't affect necessarily, unless you get very anxious, is that academic achievement. Now, if you grow in your emotional intelligence, it doesn't mean you're going to become necessarily a nice person. It could be you become more blunt and assertive when you express unpleasant truths in certain situations or contexts. But it's something about emotional intelligence is something about knowing about your emotions and how they affect your life. There are, like in all psychological theories, there are different models. In fact, I found out there's probably like 12 different models in existence right now after 1990. Now, people don't just embrace, it's much like in psychology, is you get one, for example, Freud came up with one idea about psychology, and then we had Freud, and then we had Jung, and we had other people who developed it. So each author seems to come up with a different little idea, but I like the one that this Goldman, he actually popularized the one that was developed at Yale. I think it makes a lot more sense, at least to me. And I think that's what's important in terms of as I present this, because I think it has some really good information. And that's why I'm basing this on that. I would recommend, by the way, if you really want to explore this more, is that Daniel Goleman does have a book out, and it's called Emotional Intelligence. And he actually describes the fact that he thinks it can make matter more than IQ. Why it can matter more than IQ is that he sees this as an integral component in our daily lives that we need to deal with. So I would recommend that book. By the way, it has a lot of really, I think, groundbreaking ideas in it. And it does it in a popular way that I think can be easily understood. Now, here's a working definition of emotion. What are emotions? Now, you may say, I know what they are. Well, what are they? This is how the working emotions are. They're impulses to act. I think that's an important thing to understand. They become impulses to act, instant plans for handling life that evolution has instilled in us. In fact, Darwin believed that they evolved in us as early humans went into society and also had to deal with things that were threatening to them, either fight or flight, as you probably remember from a long time ago. And they developed, and they're still developing as our society changes, by the way, and as we understand them more and as we develop more. Some people say it's all nature. Well, most people say now it's nurture and nature. It's where we live. It's how we are treated when we're young. It's our society that all influences us in terms of our emotional repertoire. And our emotions play a unique role, by the way, and have really basic biological signatures attached to them. That sometimes people don't realize that there are things that I'm going to try to demonstrate and show that in a way in a few minutes. There's a physiological response attached to each of the emotions, and they're different. And they prepare the body for various kinds of responses. And I think that's an important thing to know. Here's an example. One of the most common emotions is anger. What happens in anger? And they've done enough research and documented with enough people to really document the physiological components to the emotion. Blood flows to the hands, making it easier to grasp a weapon or strike a foe. Heart rate increases. A rush of hormones, such as adrenaline, generates a pulse of energy strong enough for vigorous action. Now, in 56 years of ministry, I've had more wives come up to me and tell me that they believe that their husbands have only one emotion, and that is anger. I believe that's because anger, when you're in that physiological reaction, you feel more potent, you feel more, stronger and in control of things. And I think for whatever reason, I think we really do. Men tend to anger more than to other emotions. Now, here's a recommended reading, and I've been using this even and putting it in my bulletin. It's a small book about a big problem. And it's meditations. There are 50 meditations, and it's geared to have every day a meditation on either anger, patience, or peace. I'm finding it really quite wonderful. And people that are reading parts of my bulletin are finding it really very good too, because it gives us insights to anger, but also gives us insights to patience and peace. Now, I unfortunately didn't read it one day at a time. I read the whole book first before I started to use it. But I think it has some really good thoughts in it, and I would recommend it to anybody. It's on, you can, both of the two books that I've recommended, by the way, you can get either in hardback form or you can get it on Kindle. And of course, I only read everything at this present point in my life on Kindle, because I've been trying to get rid of my library and no one wants it. And so that I'm not going to buy more books. Anyway, now here's some more examples with the physiological reactions. Love, and I'll let you read that yourself. Surprise. Look at this, is that they've documented that people lift their eyebrows when they're surprised with something. Happiness. It really fosters an increase in available energy. It's really interesting, and they've done a lot of research about this and documented with a number of people. So it's not just it's like an imagination of some professor. They're actually bringing students, or they bring in people, and they create situations where the various emotions come up and see what their physiological reactions are, and sometimes even do some modern kind of analysis of the hormonal changes in people. Now here just a couple more. Look at this: disgust, upper lip curls, nose wrinkles, sadness. There's a drop in energy, and it really ends up with being too much about fatigue, which is a really interesting thing. Now, we have to admit as human beings, and this is what the study has come up with, we have two different minds, one that thinks and one that feels. They're fundamentally different ways of knowing and interacting with ourselves and with others. The rational mind is all about comprehension, right? And more prominent awareness and thoughtfulness and ability to ponder and reflect, where the emotional mind is a different way of knowing. There's quite frequently impulsivity involved with it. The emotions can be very powerful. And we know this: when people become very, very emotional, guess what? They become very, very illogical at times. And so that's why now they're promoting the idea of emotional intelligence, that if you have emotional intelligence, you can respond to your emotion in a way that doesn't allow you to become illogical also. Now, they usually work together, right? the human intelligence and the emotional intelligence, but they're different ways of knowing, and they guide us through the world. There's usually, ordinarily, a balance between them. The rational mind refining rather, and sometimes vetoing the inputs and the impulses of the emotional mind. The interesting thing is, though, is that when we become very emotional, the balance tips in favor of the emotions as opposed to the intelligence. That's why they're promoting the idea of emotional intelligence in a way to try to learn how to control those feelings and use them for positive growth instead of kind of sidetracking us into just an emotional reaction. This is why I think in some very really ways is that I see it as I've been really contemplating it and thinking about it. I think it's so closely connected to spiritual growth, is to know also the emotions and how they fit into our lives. Now, why do we need emotional intelligence? Well, I do think if we know more about our emotions, we know about how to deal with them and what triggers them and so forth, is that we can be more successful in life and more effective in our work. We can motivate ourselves even when we're frustrated. We can control our impulses and delay gratifications, which usually get us off track. So many people are not able to control their impulses, and it really does make them less effective. And we have to, most times in life, have to delay gratification if we really want to be successful. And then it can help us regulate our moods because it can swamp our ability to think if they get out of control. And then I think the most important thing is that as we have emotional intelligence, we can be a more empathetic person, and we can have hope, which I think brings success and joy to life. Now, what is this? Emotional intelligence is ability to monitor our own and others' feelings and emotions, to discriminate among them, and to use this information to guide our thinking and our actions. So we just don't go off into the emotions, but if we can monitor our own emotions, we can then be more effective in what we do. It focuses on the recognitions of our and the use of our own and other emotional states. And this is where it really is important, I think, in parishes, because it'll help us to solve problems and regulate behavior. Because many times we as priests have to deal with people who are emotional. And we have to understand that and not be trapped and pulled into their own emotionality. And so, but it means about knowing our own. Because if you don't know your own emotions and the things that trigger your own emotions, you'll never understand other people's emotional states. Now, here's a couple places I found, which I actually went on and did it. It's like really fun. It's his first reference, and if you want, I have a PDF copy of this PowerPoint so you can get the reference. But you can actually take an assessment, and then they will send back to you their analysis of what they think your emotional quotient is, and make some suggestions. Or simple Google search, by the way. If you go on emotional intelligence, there's so much stuff out there at the present time that it's amazing. Or, and this is the one that I really caught. They're sending me emails almost every day. It's called 6 Seconds.org. And I took their test. And so now they're sending all these things to me, but it really is quite fascinating because they have a lot of material out there. They also sponsor helping you become an emotional intelligent coach. But the problem is it costs a lot of money. So I can't really suggest you become an emotional intelligence coach because unless you've got a whole lot of money and a whole lot of time. Now, here's Goleman's model, by the way. The one I told you, the professors from Yale and his graduate student, is Goleman popularized it. And it has 4 pillars, 4 different pillars. The first one is self-awareness. Now, self-awareness is in a sense of recognizing feelings and building a vocabulary for them and seeing the links between thoughts, feelings, and reactions. Knowing if thoughts or feelings are ruling a decision. Seeing the consequences of alternate choices and applying these insights to decisions about such issues that come up in life. Now, I took that directly from Goleman. It's a wonderful synthesis, and you'll find it if you get his book in that. Self-awareness also takes the form of recognizing your strengths and weaknesses and seeing yourself in a positive but realistic light. I think that's what theosis is all about, is if we can really see ourselves in a positive and realistic. So I think it harmonizes very closely with our Eastern theology, because we have to know ourselves and we have to be able to look at ourselves, and Jesus gives us all these examples, by the way. Now, self-management is the second pillar. This is to manage your emotions, realizing what is behind the feeling. For example, the hurt that triggers anger. It's usually some kind of hurt in most of us that triggers us into anger. Whether it means is that somehow, and I've looked at my own life and known that somehow that if someone depreciates perhaps my intelligence, is that sometimes that can spawn, until I really kind of face the issue, can spawn anger. It is a way of learning ways to handle anxieties, anger, and sadness. Those are really very important things. Learning how to manage them. It's also taking responsibility for decisions and actions and following through on commitments. So that's what the self-management is all about. It's all about of doing that. Now, the authors have suggested some effective strategies to deal with your emotions and so forth. One is channeling an emotion in a new and constructive way, such as through exercising or writing or painting or doing something that is different and gets you out of the mode of really just being captured by your emotions. The second strategy, avoiding the triggers. If you know that there's certain people that really tick you off, or situations or environments, then you can stay out of the way, because it will more likely bring out a negative emotion. Another strategy, seeking positive experiences. Instead of the negative ones, is that, so watch a comedy on a movie, or listening to some really nice music to get yourself out of the mode of just impulsively responding to the feeling that you're having. Another strategy, turning emotions around. If you see you're angry, do just the opposite of the anger in terms of expressing kindness or gentleness. And then and this is an interesting strategy, one of them they suggest is just sit and watch your emotions and be a passive observer instead of acting on them impulsively. That's what emotional intelligence is to help us to derive and use those particular strategies to help us manage life. And what happens if you can do that is, I think, you become more peaceful. There's an internal peace that comes when you're in control of your own emotions. You know what triggers your emotions, and you know what behaviors that may result, and you can change that. It also helps, by the way, in relationships in a great way. Now, the third pillar is social awareness or empathy. Now, empathy, I think, is the most important thing that we as priests and as healers for people, I think, need to develop if we haven't already developed it. Empathy is the ability to see things from another person's perspective and to consider their individual thoughts and feelings about an experience. Of course, we can never understand another person's mind completely, but we can actively learn about a person's inner thoughts and feelings by paying attention to how they are communicating, whether verbally or non-verbally. In other words, really paying attention to them and seeking to know what's going on inside of them, instead of just reacting ourselves against what they may be expressing to us. Empathy is a kind of mind reading, by the way. It's based on making inferences about people's internal worlds based on their actions. So you look at how a person acts, and you can somehow realize what's going on inside of them. Be more willing to ask yourself, by the way, what is the person thinking? What is this person feeling? Why is this person acting the way they do? These types of questions will be a great starting point in building more empathy in our daily relationships. Now, there's one final pillar that the Yale School and also Goldman have popularized, and that is relationship management or social skills. Once you understand the emotions of yourself and others, the next question is, how do I respond to other people's emotions? This is where social skills come in. First, understand that a lot of your emotional world has a social component to it. For example, emotions such as love, guilt, rejection, embarrassment are really social emotions. If you want to build healthy relationships, by the way, other people, is to become sensitive to them. Now, there are some key skills that we can develop, and they're involved in those 4 pillars. Self-awareness, which is absolutely essential. We have to know what's going on inside of ourselves in order to understand, and even being open to and understanding what's going on in other people. Identifying, expressing, and managing our feelings. That, I think, is critical. Sometimes people can be, I've found, can be fairly insulting. But why do I have to react with anger? Why do we have to or even sometimes in self-questioning and self-loathing because they've criticized perhaps my sermon? It's critical that if I'm going to be the model for people how to spiritually develop, I have to be centered. I have to be peaceful. I have to be someone who can truly help them understand what's going on in themselves. And a simple question is, sometimes, when people react, is it so that they understand you're listening to them, for example? It's just to say to them after they've said something, instead of preparing your own response, is saying, I think I heard you say. That simple thing, when you're in a conversation with something, can change the whole complexion of your interaction. I think I heard you say. They can therefore say, no, that's not what I was trying to say. And then you can open a good, positive discussion and dialogue. Now, I'm going to end this by saying, in just giving you another idea, they have come up with this whole chart, by the way. These 4 pillars have things underneath them, as you can see. For example, with self-management, to develop an emotional balance, that means you've got to be adaptable, and you've got to be a positive person. And even organizational awareness, which I think is important for us as we work as an eparchy, and then achievement. You'll see with relationship management, there also in there is teamwork and conflict management rather. is that in all these areas, if you study that, it becomes it's a lifelong process, obviously, but it's really very, so you can't do it in one presentation in 1 hour. It just doesn't work. But then I decided, okay, I found something else which I thought would be important to us as priests and as leaders, pastors and leaders, because I think pastors are called to be leaders. Leaders in terms of spiritual development, which means leaders that also help people become truly human beings that are like Jesus and that are children of God. And I'm going to give you an acrostic. For example, L is for listening. Place a higher value on listening than on talking. Don't be thinking of your response when someone is talking. Just listen. And like I suggested, you can say, I think I heard you say. There's something that happens when people really feel we listen to them. E is for equipping others with the tools and resources necessary to fill their lives effectively. I think the steps of spiritual growth, and especially now as we've entered into this period before the Great Fast, which talks about metanoia, and when we already heard that one is desire, and the second is humility, and they spell it out, that those kinds of things are things that equip people to really live their lives more effectively. A is for appreciation. You gotta appreciate the people that work in your parish. That is so important. And people want to hear you express an appreciation, even if they don't necessarily express their appreciation for us. I think it's our job to say, I appreciate all that you do for the parish, and to do it not just once, but frequently, making it a part of your whole time, because they're there to work and to invest their time and effort. And so we need to say to them, not only do I appreciate you, but I think the whole community appreciates you. D is for developing. I've got to want to help my parishioners grow. That may mean I've got to first undertake the task of helping myself grow. Because if I'm not involved in a process of growing, I can never convince other people to grow. They have to make sure that they have to feel that I'm doing it with them, that I'm not judging them as being inadequate. I'm telling all of us, myself included, that I need to grow and develop and to become more like Jesus, but also a more well-balanced human being. E is for enlisting. You've got to enlist people and support them in change. R is for relationships. Now, I want to ask you a question. Are your parishioners your friends? We create friends by the way we treat them and by the way we interact with them. And lastly, S is for service. Realizing that you must first give the most to your parishioners to get the most from them. Therefore, constantly seek ways to serve them instead of waiting on them to serve you. Now, here are some of the emotionally, the qualities of emotionally intelligent leaders. Where are you in that? That's the question I ask myself too. Where am I at? What steps might I take to increase my emotional intelligence? Now, while I know I'm biased in this regard, another wonderful source to begin knowing more about myself and increasing my emotional intelligence is to invest in actually going into individual psychodynamic therapy. In my training as a psychologist, I embraced my own analysis. It was thoroughly rewarding, helping me to understand myself and others more fully. Now, I think the problem is we as clergy tend to shy away from the thought of therapy, but it can be most rewarding. The problem is that it can be costly, and it can at times be very difficult to find a truly good therapist. Now, the emphasis I'm placing is on good therapists and not the religion they embrace. That's just a thought. I would open it up if anybody wants for discussion. I don't know how you feel about that, but I think I found a great similarity between leading people in terms of spiritual development and leading them to become emotionally intelligent in terms of really understanding their emotions and their feelings, and learning how to use them to more effectively lead their lives. So I'm open for discussion.
I have a question.
Sure.
So the idea of finding a good therapist or counselor, I mean, I've had a number of parishioners over the years who were really messed up by some psychologist, counselor, therapist, because that person held views. This is where the question of what religion they are, right? That person held views that were fundamentally opposed to certain Christian notions. And you have counselors who will say, go ahead, do that abortion. You don't, why should you have this hassle of this kid that you don't want? There are counselors who will rush to divorce when, or take one side in a marital problem, when in fact perhaps a little bit more patient work with them would be indicated. And so from my own experience, I am very wary of just finding a name out there. I actually became a member of the Catholic, what is it? Is it Catholic Psychotherapy Association or Catholic Psychological Association? I'm not sure what the exact name is, for the reason that they have a listing of, and it is somehow they're able to find people who are faithful, who are actually practicing their faith, not nominal Catholics. And I know that I recommended that someone work with one of the therapists who happened to be the president of the society, and it was great. It was wonderful. This person really helped. So I've had experiences of people who really helped, and I've had experiences of people who just made things more confused, more difficult. How do you go about finding someone, Father Wayne?
And I agree with that. The thing is, a good therapist is not making people in their image and likeness, but helping them find what they need to have for themselves. So you never interject your thoughts or ideas or your beliefs into the therapy. Part of it, you have to search it out. You have to talk to, and if you want to be someone that refers someone, you've got to talk to the people in the community and find out. I have one of my closest priest friends was referred to a therapist by one of the Roman Catholic dioceses, and he would call me and tell me what the therapist would say, and I would just be quiet. He says, well, why are you quiet? I said, he's a quack. You don't, when you're working with a person as a patient, you're not trying to make them in your image. You're not trying to make them believe the way you believe, but discover what is right for them. And so it's not you to run their life, because they can't be you and you can't be them. But I think part of the problem has been recently is that when they take insurance, they only give you 10 sessions, and then they have some clerk come and tell you as a psychologist, well, I don't know if they need any more therapy, and they don't know anything about therapy, and they don't know anything about what's going on between you and the patient. It's hard, I agree. I through my life, I found different people, and part of it was just talking to them. But I had thank God, I had the privilege of having supervisors when I was doing my training for therapy, and so I could start understanding. I used them also as people because they were all very. It was at a Catholic university. They were all and they weren't Catholics necessarily. Interesting enough, as a number of them were Jewish, but they taught at the Catholic university.
So was
But they
Jesus.
were good therapists. Pardon?
So was Jesus. That's okay.
Yes, that's right. So it's hard, but I think if you're going to refer people, is you need to research into society to be a source for them. And you can do that in talking to different people. As I said, this priest friend of mine is that if anybody asked me if they should go to that therapist, I would say, I think you need to look for somebody else. Only because I know what their work is like. Your work has to be fairly impersonal. Patients try to find out about you, but I think you don't reveal yourself. It's not your therapy, it's their therapy. And so you have to redirect them to keep looking at with their life and what is going to be good for them in their life. I had one patient that I worked with quite a while, horribly sexually abused by deaf parents. It was even family incest, but he was put into a Catholic home for children. And so he knew something about Catholicism, but knew very little about Catholicism. And he wanted to really know about me. And of course, that was not my place. I would just ask him, well, why do you want to know about me? And so then we would talk about that. I would redirect him in terms of, it's not about knowing about me, except the one time I had to say, and it was so funny because he turned and he said, you're like a savior for me. He said, are you a nun? I said, no, unfortunately, I'm not a nun. I happen to be a priest. And so that was the only time I revealed myself. But you don't reveal yourself to your patients because that's not what's important in the therapy. But you've got to be grounded. The therapist has got to be grounded in a good education so they act that way. But it's hard to find them. You've got to search. Sometimes people say, go and at least see one session and see what they're like. If they're trying to tell you how to lead your life, run. Because my job is to help them discover how to lead their life. And by the way, you never give advice in therapy because they will not, first of all, they will not take it. And secondly, they will do everything in the world to prove you wrong, that your advice was wrong. That's my experience.
Father Wayne, we are blessed in this eparchy that we have you and we have Dana Dobrovolska that we can turn to for advice on, do you know somebody in this area? And that's a great blessing for us, all of us, that we can ask you if you know somebody in a certain region.
Yeah, you're right. I think you're absolutely right, Andrea. I don't think you can just go in a phone book and pick out a name and go. You've got to find other people that perhaps know them or seek other advice from other, clinicians, because like you said, with the organization that you dealt with, is that they know the clinicians working in there. I get a little frightened myself, though, when they talk about, especially in this area, about go to a Christian counselor. Well, the person may not be ready and able to become a Christian if they're not Christian already. If they're Christian already and they want to talk about it, that's a different thing, But for example, if someone who comes to me, and I had a Hindu patient, they want to talk about their religion, I talk with them about their religion. and what is its meaning to them. I don't want to convert them to Christianity. That's not my it's not my job as a therapist. It may be my job as a priest, but it's not my job as a therapist.
I agree, Father Wayne. And I was talking about referring parishioners. So
Yeah.
hopefully, at least some of them would be Christians.
Hopefully, maybe somebody else too, Chris.
I have a point, and maybe some other priests have the same problem. In the parish, there's certain, not everybody, but two different groups. One group, because we're wearing masks in church. So one group is masks are a sign of Christian concern for other people. And the other people say masks are from the devil. And then you have people who say vaccination is horrible, it's terrible, don't go through it. Here's all the websites that prove. And then you have the other side saying vaccinations are saving everybody's lives. Here's all the websites that prove. And the thing about that is the emotion behind these people. It's not just that they're talking. They are so emotionally driven by this pandemic business. So I wonder, what do you have to say about that? And can you
Well,
help?
one of the things, I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's a difficult situation. I try to get people to understand each other. I ask them what they're thinking and so forth. But in terms of being open and not criticizing and condemn ones, you can't take sides. Otherwise, you're sunk. That's one of the things that we know for sure. But asking them why, in terms of that, and they come up with all kind of crazy things. And so one of the place where I worship in the second parish is a school that has a chapel in it. And the janitor came along and I was wearing a mask and he was going on. He was just railing about, I don't believe in that. It's all a hoax and all this. And I finally said to him when he stopped, I said, I wear the mask not to protect myself, but to respect other people in case they're afraid. He didn't know what to say then. He did not know what to say because I said, I do it out of respect for other people. And if we respect other people, like the last thing I want to do, much like with emotional intelligence, I don't want to make a person more frightened. And so I try to find out where they're at. And then I try to do things that will make them less frightened. But I agree with you. This epidemic has really driven people to the crazy edge. I thank God I don't have it in my parish where we had talked about it. And what I did is that I didn't enforce what I worked with the parish council. And I said, how do we want to handle this? And I let them make the decision. Then I said, this is how we as a community, led by our leadership, so the parish council, have come up with. And so I don't get any of that static, thank God.
But I guess,
It could be very bad.
do you have any idea why is this so emotional for people? Why are they so emotionally invested in their viewpoints? I think your point is
Well,
talking about.
I think our country has politicized it, though. That's the problem. We've made it a political issue. We've been all this, and it's all about freedom and independence. And don't tell me, I think the craziest thing in the world is that someone said and when the news breaks is, I'm not against masks, I'm against mandates. Hello. And what do? I don't know. People, and the only way you can do it is if you can get them into a private conversation, see why they are so frightened or why they don't care.
You say, I'm not afraid.
I know. It's a very difficult time. I've seen so much craziness during this pandemic that I wonder, where we're going is, and there's no, and I sometimes I've said one of the persons that I said, well, what do you think Jesus would do? Oh, I don't know. I said he probably would respect the people that are afraid and try to help them not be afraid. And I think because people, when they see people without a mask, are afraid. But we never think about that. So I don't know, that's where I went. Anybody else?
Father Wayne, some of the things that you mentioned obviously would be very helpful in parish leadership and working with various personalities in the parish and also assisting them to work together more effectively. In the slides that you showed, are there any particular resources or any of the institutions that you were referring to that would be for those of us, and I'm sure that's all of us who are very time limited, really kind of to dive into that as giving us the most benefit for investing time?
I think the two books that I suggested, I think only because I think anger is one of the more difficult of the emotions that we have to deal with, and especially even in a parish, people get angry about one thing or another. So that little book, and it's very simple, and even as I've done with my parishioners, I'm sharing a part of that book with them. Some are reading it, some are not. But I think the other one, if you want to know about emotional intelligence, is the one by Goldman. I think that would be the one. It's written fairly easy to read. And I think it gives you a lot of insight about because the first thing we have to say is that how do I develop my own and feel comfortable in my own emotional development, intelligence, or my emotional intelligence. How do I feel comfortable? Have I really understood why I react the way I do when I do? What triggers, for example, my own sadness, my own anger, my own, whatever emotion I'm dealing with, and engaging people. Like I honestly admit to people, I said, these are things I'm working on myself, because if they think you're just talking about curing them, they'll reject it. So part of it is saying, we're all human beings and we all have skills that we can develop. These are the ones I'm working at. And that takes a lot of courage and openness to say that, because sometimes we want to present, the picture that we're the perfect ones and they're all out there are imperfect, and that doesn't work. So, but I've gotten more people to be involved in things like this in terms of even study if I admitted that I'm also working through those things too. Because I don't know any human being that's not working through some of this in some way. That's my own thought on that. Did it help you, Dean, at all? I don't know.
Yes, it did. I think I'll
If you want me
start
to,
on that book as soon as possible.
I can send, if you need a reference, I can send. I have a Father Roman told me to put it into a PDF document of the presentation. If you want it, send me your email and I can send it to you. Okay. I really do try it. It's fun. I mean, that's the nice thing about it. It's 6seconds.org. You can go on and take the self-test. And it's so fun to see what they send back to you. I found it really rewarding insofar as because you have to answer this series of questions and it's all online, and they send back their analysis of that and make suggestions. And I thought some of them were very good.
I also wanted to add something to what Father Andres said in terms of experience with therapists and counselors. It can help, but it kind of depends on who that is. It can actually can really get somebody, off the track.
Yes, indeed.
When you live in for example, like we do, the Archdiocese of St. Louis is very large and has a lot of resources, and they have contacts of people who are faith-based and come at things from the kind of values that we feel they ought to, but are absolutely experienced in therapy. And of course, therapy in the end is a process of facilitating self-discovery and self-analysis.
That's right.
And that's why it's really important not to interject, even for someone who's a good Catholic and has very good values. In the end, therapy has to help the patient by having the patient help themselves, understand themselves better. And even with Catholic therapists, that's not always an easy thing to do. But anyone who's in a larger metropolitan area, and if there's a strong diocese or archdiocese there, that's one of the first places I think to turn for possible resources.
I agree wholeheartedly, Eugene. Right on target. Right on target. Help people become who they're called to be. And they're not called to be me. So I don't want to make them in my image and likeness. And that's really important in therapy, to be non-judgmental, to be there, but help them to see and do. And of course, one of the most important with psychodynamic therapy, which I think is so important, is to bring a lot of these unconscious memories and thoughts to mind. And the theory is that once I bring them to mind and I look at them, I can then more effectively deal with them and make them, not a negative thing in my life, but a positive thing in my life. Anybody else?
Can I ask that the PDF be sent to all of our clergy?
Sure. Do you want to?
Pastor Wayne, it will be good when you will send to eparchy and we will send to everybody.
Perfect. Thank you, Bishop.
Okay.
Thank
Somebody else?
It's not an easy concept, but I would really encourage you. I think it's fun to explore these ideas. I think it helps you grow, understand yourself more. So I said it's a relatively new concept, and only 1990 is where it started really being developed. And I think it can be. I think that if you, which I have done in my own life and in my parish, is I think if you marry that to also the spiritual development ideas and theosis, and looking at the positive kinds of attitudes that Jesus manifested, and marrying the two and showing them why you do it. Because just telling them to be, more like Jesus in terms of unconditionally love, well, unless you love yourself, unless you've explored love within your own heart, it won't happen. So giving them tools to imitate Jesus by looking at his characteristics and then saying, okay, but this is how I find out or develop those characteristics in myself. I think that's critical. Because I think sometimes we just present these ideas, but there's no strategies to make them work. And like one of the things is that emotional intelligence is, and I didn't use it. I skipped that portion in my presentation. Is like a toolkit. It helps you understand how to deal with these things and know, like, why do I get angry? And what do I get angry at? And once I know that, I can say, I'm not going to get angry at it. I can start modulating my anger and dealing with it more effectively, and that will open me to unconditionally love more. Because if I get angry at the way people respond to me, I can't unconditionally love them unless I've dealt with my own issues, which is really the whole thing.
I have one more question.
I don't have an answer.
When you were talking about the two minds,
Yeah.
I found that I was of two minds about that piece of the presentation. I liked it, but I was then thinking, okay, where would you situate the nous, the patristic notion of the highest part of our humanity that has intuitive connection with God? Because Evagrius will talk about the rational reasoning mind, and then he says, but above that is the mind, the intellect that is imageless. It doesn't use words and it doesn't use images, which in our iconographic tradition is very interesting. You have to go get beyond the images, and that is the nous, which intuitively connects with God. Where would that be in a scheme where you have these two minds?
Well, that's a really profound question. I think part of it is that as we envision the Spirit living within us, as we're the temples of that Spirit, is it gives us intuitive insights to things, but sometimes our nurture, our upbringing gets in the way of that. And so if we start looking at that more reasonably, and as I said, we're trying to develop emotional intelligence, I think in the Spirit within us will give us those intuitive kind of insights to life, because now we've unblocked the Spirit working. Because I think as these old memories and these old ideas and these old experiences get in the way, the Spirit can't work. I believe that's really true. I think we block the Spirit really directing our lives unless we unplug and get rid of all those, negative especially the negative memories. I've been also writing in the bulletin, something else that I've come across about having Jesus help us heal our hurtful and negative experiences in life, our memories, is working on that and realizing there's probably not one of us have ever gone through growing up can never say that we didn't have some negative experiences, and those are all in the back of our mind. They're all there. We have to surface them, and then we can use Jesus as a way. And the author suggests that you present those to Jesus and put him in there with you and saying, what does this mean? And one of the things I've found is and I can honestly say, and this sounds like a confession, I've had many, many challenges that are negative. But once I found out that the challenges only help shape me and help me grow, and that's a hard thing to admit for people, but the challenges, even the more difficult ones, have always been the ones that have helped me really grow spiritually, if I accept them and try to understand them. So I don't know if that answered the question.
Well, it helps. It's,
It's a very abstract
really
thing.
Understand it, but it helps move the question along. And, I'm thinking I would really love to read your bulletins. Perhaps you can share it with the rest of us, because
No, you'll pronounce me a heretic.
I've been called a false prophet. So,
Although Brazilian sisters, because I once conducted a retreat with them, I send the bullet to them only because I was there for I did the retreat. And so Sister Joanna, who's I guess now the provincial, she sent me this email saying, she said, you have this wonderful sprinkling of psychology and Eastern theology in your writings. And it's like, it's really rather interesting. I said, oh, I don't know.
But I personally would be thrilled to receive those.
If you give me positive feedback, then I'll do that.
Okay.
I don't make announcements. I have like one little column for any announcements. I use the bulletin as a teaching tool. I have something there about liturgy. I have something there about spirituality. I have a reflection on the gospel and the epistle. It's a teaching tool to help people hopefully grow. Because I only see them once a week, typically. And and you got 10 minutes, right? And you don't want to, well, at least I don't want to talk any longer than 10 minutes because then you lose your crowd. But nevertheless, but I thank you for listening. Oh,
Father, do you have it on the website, your bulletins on the website?
yes, I do.
So that can be downloaded and we can read it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Deacon Leonard uploads both St. Michael. What is the Leonard? What is the?
It'd be St. Michael. I have to look it up. Hang on 1 second. Let me look it up.
Maybe
I don't know it off the top of my head.
Okay, maybe better the saying when you will send to eparchy and we will send to everybody.
I'm afraid they drag me up in front of the Inquisition because I don't know if it's always. I mean, there's a lot of psychology in it.
Father Wayne, now everybody will control you and everybody will know everything about yourself and your parish.
Will you protect me?
And God protect you all the time, and Mother of God. I am not the best protector.
After that.
I want immunity from excommunication, though. Bishop.
Yes, indeed.
You know, being burned at the stake is not much different from living in Phoenix in the summertime.
Okay,
I hope it was helpful. It was
very
I was
helpful.
Very
Thank you very much, Father Wayne, for everything what you share for everybody. And I think maybe I will look for another possibility when you will share another your experience. But it's really, you have a lot of experience. You don't know everything like everybody, but you know something, you know, especially your experience. It's like combine your experience for your life, because you have different kind of experience. One experience in psychology, you know, and other experience in church. When you combine these two experiences, it'll be good for all of us, you know, because you can see many problems for different perspective, you know, from different places. And I think it's sometimes problem for us, for priests, for clergy. We see people only for our perspective, you know, it's like only spirituality, but you have told this emotional intelligence is very important, because it's not the most important, but it's past of ourselves. It's very important when we know about this. Okay, maybe now.
One last comment is that just a personal experience is that for my dissertation, for my clinical degree, is I kept dragging it out and dragging it out and dragging it out because I always kept psychology and religion separate. It wasn't until the chair of my dissertation committee got me to bring them together that I finally found where I needed. And that changed in many ways the way I do ministry, but also changed my life in a real important way. So bringing the two together, because we're human beings, I think, and a way of also promoting spiritual development, if you put the two together, I think can be very effective. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate your listening.
Nice job.
Thank you very much for everybody for your being with us. Father, maybe let's go pray some prayer.
Okay. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Oh, Heavenly Father, you've given us life, and you've given us a revelation in the person of your Son, Jesus, about how to live this life. Help us to grow in in actualizing our likeness of him who is your image, your human image. We thank you for the gift of life, and we offer our life back to you in thanksgiving together with him. We say this to you, who we call Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, now and ever, and forever. Amen.
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 Так,
Good night.
Thank you very much. Дякую.
good night.
Дякую.
I'm leaving if no one else is.
Yes.
Well, leave.
Father Richard will be stay here forever. No.
Владико, я вам там післав щось.
Що ви Святого Духа мені надіслали?
Ні, ви вже маєте його, аж переливається. Я потребую з вами поговорити. Я питався, коли можна до вас подзвонити.
Добре, давайте. Я можу зараз півгодини говорити. Чи добре, чи можемо пізніше?
То добре, якщо то я до вас зараз подзвоню.
Я навіть 25 хвилин, за 25 хвилин я можу йти, добре?
Добре.
Все, давай.
Тому ми виходимо з Zoom і лишаємося для розмови на півгодини.
І ми маємо свій Zoom окремий, отче Петр.
Окей, то з Богом.
Дякую.
Вам всім.